It was like a slap in the face in a way. Nobody's on our side. My sister-in-law, she said, guys, run this thing like a startup. We're both startup people. And we know most startups also have a poor prognosis. I went to Gangnam and I walked around. They have this thing called K-pop Road to kind of remind myself there's a world out there. And one day I will rejoin this world. He often told me, Heidi, just remember, Chad just wants you to be happy. I don't like people to think that the outcome defines the success in a way.
Enjoying today's episode? Click subscribe. You'll get the stories, science, and strategies to help you and everyone you care about kick cancer's ass. Welcome back to Kicking Cancer's Ass, the podcast rewriting cancer's story and putting you back in control. Today, I'm talking about things I've never heard of before. MDS, AML, bone marrow transplants, and the impossible decisions, devastating failures, and how one woman, a friend of mine, turned torture into a mission to change the future for families facing bone marrow failure. So please welcome Heidi Kay Carson, board member and Rare X lead for Team Telomere. Heidi, welcome to Kicking Cancer's Ass.
Oh, Joelle, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm glad you're going to share Chad's story and your story. So let's talk about it. Let's walk us through the moment when Chad's mysterious health issues became a diagnosis, myelodysplastic syndrome, on top of liver issues, and then that progressed to AML, which is a form of leukemia.
Yeah.
So how did this come about? What was it like discovering it, trying to figure it out, and then navigating the bone marrow failure?
Yeah, well, it all started very, very quietly about 20 years ago when our son was born, and Chad had some routine blood testing and found out that his liver enzymes were a little high. We didn't understand that because he was a really healthy person. He had no symptoms. He felt fine. And we just kind of went forward with a little bit more liver surveillance to try to figure out what was causing these elevated liver enzymes. And for a number of years, nobody really knew, and Chad just kept getting his liver tested until about 2011. So it was about 6 years after the original hint that there was anything going on with his liver that he actually had what they called cryptogenic cirrhosis, so no known cause cirrhosis. And that was a complete surprise because here he is, a really healthy person. Liver cirrhosis is usually associated with, let's say, too much drinking or maybe some environmental exposure, and he really had nothing like that. And
no
nobody
hepatitis.
had an explanation. Exactly.
Right. No hepatitis. No, I mean, he wasn't an alcoholic.
Right.
He was just a healthy, I remember him being a very fit guy.
Yep. He liked to exercise, and we heard things like, well, 10% of liver cases that are cryptogenic, or 10% of liver cases are cryptogenic. We're never going to find out. Maybe it's an autoimmune disease. Maybe it's something. Yeah, it was just kind of people threw their hands up. And we did talk to a lot of doctors because we were very curious. The good thing is Chad really had no symptoms. So life just kind of continued on as normal. We traveled, we raised our kids, we worked, we did all the good things that people do. And then in about 2017, it was a number of years later. So this is going on like 12 years since the original suspicion that anything was wrong. Chad was actually listed for liver transplantation. But people were telling him, you know, your liver is doing great. You're like the healthiest person on the liver transplant waiting list. But at the same time, we prepared ourselves for the fact that maybe there would be a liver transplant in our future. We read about liver transplants. We kind of felt like they're not so, I mean, they're scary. But given the alternative, they're not,
right.
We'll manage our way through this and we'll figure out, we'll just make it happen when it needs to happen. And maybe it won't happen. Maybe your liver is just done getting worse, done fibrosing. Maybe it's just going to hang in there for a number of years. So that was kind of our steady state. And then, you know, it was kind of like a smoldering fire. We knew the fire was out there. We knew what the treatment for the solution to the fire was. But then at the end of 2017, while he was exercising, he noticed he was unusually out of breath. And so he went to his liver doctor and they did a number of tests and found out he was pancytopenic, basically all his blood numbers through the floor. So we thought, oh my gosh, how can you be having sort of an iffy liver? Now you have this massive, massive problem of all your blood numbers through the floor. And he had a bone marrow biopsy following that showed that he had myelodysplastic syndrome. And the words on that bone marrow biopsy were really unmistakable. They said poor prognosis. because he had this P53 mutation, which is like a very important gene. They call it the guardian of the genome. And when you have a mutation in your P53 gene, I mean, it's serious. So that was unmistakable. And it went from sort of this smoldering kind of problem maybe we'll deal with in the future someday to all of a sudden the house is on fire. And we had to figure out, what are we going to do with this? So they put him on a regimen of chemo right away. But it was very clear the chemo wasn't going to last forever. It was only going to prolong the inevitable. And we knew what the inevitable kind of was. We weren't delusional about that. But we thought, if there's anything we can do, we're going to do it. And we thought, we got this great advice from my sister-in-law. She said, guys, run this thing like a startup. We're both startup people, Chad and I. We both know what it takes. And we know most startups also have a poor prognosis, right? Given that like most startups don't make it, most startups end up going out of business.
Right.
We thought, okay, well, what does it take to make a startup successful? That's all we're going to do, and put all of our efforts, energy, resources, whatever connections we have, anything against trying to make this poor prognosis a not poor prognosis.
Now, when did it move from we're going to need a liver transplant to a bone marrow transplant?
Yeah, so all of a sudden we knew the only curative path for the liver was a liver transplant, and the only curative path for the bone marrow failure was a bone marrow transplant. So as soon as we got this poor prognosis, we knew we needed 2 transplants. That would be the only curative solution. Yeah. So, but that introduces this horrible catch-22, because if you're sick enough that you need a liver transplant, how are you going to get a bone marrow transplant? And if you're sick enough that you need a bone marrow transplant, like how are you going to get a liver transplant? Like how does one even go about this? I mean, healthy people get declined from both of these all the time. So how are we going to get kind of a not very healthy person through one, if not the other? So that was our challenge. And honestly, I have to say our local hospital really didn't have many good solutions for us. So we just, in between chemo cycles, we just jumped on a plane and we started flying around the country, just to anyone who would talk to us anywhere, anyone who had any idea, anyone who had seen these diseases before. We still had no idea like why this healthy person had these 2 super terrible, heavy illnesses. How could this possibly be? Right? What would possibly cause this to happen?
What's the underlying? And with the bone marrow failure, was that when it was also diagnosed as AML, or did that come later?
So the MDS eventually did progress to AML, but at the time we just thought of it as leukemia. We just thought of it as bone marrow problems. We just thought of it as the only way to get out of this is a bone marrow transplant.
Okay.
And we weren't super worried about sort of definitions and terminology. At that point, we were just like, here's this massive problem. We have to undo this impossible catch-22. And so on the East Coast, we actually talked to a doctor who said, I think you can get off of chemo for a little bit, maybe a month or 2. You can get your liver transplant lickety-split in that time, and then you get right back on chemo and get ready for your bone marrow transplant. And so that was the first time we'd heard from anybody who had any idea of how to move forward. And we took that as sort of our guiding light, because we didn't have any other ideas. Like, how are we going to do this?
How did he think Chad would handle anti-rejection with no immune system?
Details to be left as an exercise for the reader.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people did not give us a lot of thought through exactly how this was going to happen, and nobody gave us any idea about how exactly this was going to work. Nobody had ever seen this before. How would they even know how to do this? And we also knew, so in the United States, most of the liver transplants that happen in this country are from deceased donors. Like people maybe get into a car accident, they donate their organs.
Right.
But those organs are very rare and precious. There aren't even enough of those to go around for the people who desperately need them. And Chad having this massive comorbidity, like one of the first calls we got after that poor prognosis result was, you're off the liver transplant waiting list because we can't afford to kind of waste
a liver
on you if you're not going to have a successful outcome, right?
That had to be devastating.
Yeah, that it was like a slap in the face in a way. Like, who's on our side? Nobody's on our side. Everybody's just telling us no. That was how that felt at that time. That was really negative.
Yeah, and Chad was a young man.
He was 46 at the time.
Right, young man. Now, you said now with all your time working in the health world as a advocate and with your nonprofit, you actually learned a lot more. You said something about one is plumbing, one is chemistry. Can you
Yeah.
explain that?
Yeah, just sort of the difference between a liver transplant and a bone marrow transplant. I mean, they're both serious events, and you don't want to have to do either one of them. But it was just kind of interesting that we learned along the way, like switching out a liver, it's a little bit like plumbing, right? There's a bad part, you switch it out, you put the good part in. It's kind of like fixing your car in a way. But a bone marrow transplant, I didn't realize this. It literally affects everything in your system because it's touching your immune system. It's touching every cell of your body because that's where your blood is going. Your blood is going everywhere throughout your body. And it affects, it's just so, it's so transformative. Like I liken that more to baking bread, right? So you bake bread, you can never kind of revert back to the batter. It's a totally different substance at the end. And I feel like that is my experience with what a bone marrow transplant is like. We thought once we got the liver transplant, hey, we'll just move right on and switch out your bone marrow and you'll be good to go. I mean, we were not naive, but we knew it was very complicated. But conceptually, that was how we saw the problem. And yeah, unfortunately, it ended up not being that way.
Well, so you were told you're off the liver list, but he was able to proceed with a bone marrow transplant.
Yeah, so first we had to get him a new liver. And once we got off the bone marrow transplant list, we knew the only alternative was a living liver donor.
Okay.
And in the United States, not as much living liver donation is done. I think more and more now than it had been back then. It was maybe 2018, 2019 when we were actively looking. But we knew that is the primary mode of transplantation in other countries, specifically Korea and India.
Okay.
They are kind of, I would say, technologically ahead of the US in terms of living liver donor transplantation. And so it turned out one of Chad's doctors was himself Korean and connected us to some hospitals over there. And we flew to Korea with the idea that I'm going to be Chad's living liver donor because who else is going to do it, right? And then we just went over there together, and that was when doors started opening up for us because people saw us and thought, gosh, if this wife and this husband are this determined to make this happen, that they're coming here from across the ocean, and this woman is willing to give her liver to save her husband's life, like, we'll help. We will help. We'll absolutely queue you up. And that hospital where we were, they did, well, at the time they were doing about 400 living liver donor transplants a year. So like more than one a day. So I had every faith that these guys know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they took us on. And honestly, I felt like for the first time, somebody was on our side. Somebody wasn't turning us away, or somebody saying, oh, I've never seen this before. I don't know what this is. At that point, we kind of had figured out what the cause was. We had, along the way, with our journeys around the United States, we had run into somebody who had told us about this idea of a telomere biology disorder. But it didn't really make sense because the classical features of that, which tend to be sort of like nail issues or oral leukoplakia or skin conditions, didn't really match Chad's outward phenotype. He didn't really have any of those. He did have kind of early graying hair, but I didn't really understand, like, how does that connect to these? I mean, those things are all kind of, to me, relatively superficial compared to these things that he was dealing with in terms of his liver's failing, his bone marrow's failing. We brought that back to our home hospital, and eventually he did get a telomere length test that showed that his telomeres were very short, and that was considered then the sort of probable cause for all of these major health issues. And now I know, in fact, short telomeres can affect literally almost every system in the body. At the time, we didn't realize that, but it almost didn't even matter because, like, we were on this race against the clock because we're still operating under the assumption, okay, the chemo is going to run out. We need to get a solution. We need to get him to bone marrow transplant before the chemo runs out. Doesn't matter what's behind this. And I don't know if that's right thinking or not right thinking, but that was the only thinking we had at the time. It was just like, it doesn't matter why. We're here now. We got to face this.
Okay. And so you did the living liver transplant.
Yep.
And I take it was successful.
It took a while for Chad to recover. His body had been through a lot. It wasn't just he sprang right back. He was in the ICU for a good long time, probably
in Korea.
In Korea, about a month and a half in the ICU. And in that time, his body got weaker and weaker while he was just kind of recovering. He lost a lot of muscle weight. He had been intubated. And afterwards, when people were in COVID land talking about respirators and learning to breathe again after getting extubated from these breathing machines. I understood exactly what that was all about, because it's very easy to kind of just let the machine breathe for you. And then when you have to breathe on your own again, oh my gosh, you forget. Like I sat there, I was like, Chad, breathe, breathe, breathe. Because there's a little machine where I could see when he was taking an intake of breath. And that was sort of like coaching him to breathe again. We had to do that. And then his esophagus had gotten really weak too, and he couldn't swallow. So we had to like practice swallowing and eating, and starting with just very soft, the pudding-like foods, and moving up to like actual things you chew. And oh my gosh, that was a whole long recovery. But that was all precipitated by the fact that he had just spent so long recovering from this liver transplant that just took so much out of him.
And did they've stopped the chemo while he was recovering?
Yep. Yeah, no way they could have put him on chemo in that state, right?
So you spend 6 weeks with him in the ICU.
Yeah.
Heidi, where were your kids?
My kids were at home. And we tried to keep life as normal as possible for them. And Chad's amazing parents came to the rescue and kind of filled in as substitute parents for us, and just lived in our house and took them to school and went to PTA meetings and everything. So there was no way we could have done this without that. And just to enable us to kind of have the freedom and the flexibility and the luxury to go around the world and look for better answers.
Wow. Okay, so he does ultimately recover from the liver transplant.
Yep.
And now you're moving towards a bone marrow transplant.
Yes.
How much time was between the two transplants?
We wanted to have it happen right away, but because he was so weak from the liver transplant, people were not super excited about taking this person who's kind of practically skeletal and putting them through a bone marrow transplant, knowing how much that affects their whole body, head to toe. So eventually, when we got home from the liver transplant, that was like February of 2019. By the time the bone marrow transplant happened, it was July. So good number of 4 or 5 months.
That's still pretty close for two very major
Yes, and
medical
that whole
events.
time we were just like, Chad, eat. Chad, feed yourself. Chad, put on weight. But it was hard. Like, he really had lost his appetite. He didn't really want to eat. I don't know how to describe his body at that state. Mentally, too, he had not recovered 100%. He used to be so on top of, like, his medications. I mean, he's got a PhD in computer science. Like, this guy can manage a medicine regimen. But afterwards, he was really relying on me to kind of help him get to appointments, help him take his medication. And I thought, well, you know, if we get him through this bone marrow transplant, he has the rest of his life. His brain will eventually recover. And if it doesn't 100% recover, I still love him anyway, right? Like, it's going to be fine. He's still got enough brain to make it through this life, right?
And to be your partner.
And to be my partner. And I wasn't really worried. He was still Chad. He was still smiling. He was still himself, even if he couldn't remember what he had read in the news the previous day.
Okay.
So, yes. So
we get to July.
We get to July.
And he has the bone marrow transplant.
Yes. And things looked a little shaky right from the start, I have to say, because they were expecting certain numbers to start improving. And they didn't really improve right away. In fact, they never ended up improving. We kept looking for signals in the data, right, that this number was going to improve, or we'd see something improve and then it'd go back down. And we heard things from the nurses like, oh, your bone marrow, it's like a factory, and the factory is full of cobwebs, and we have to clear out the cobwebs before the new bone marrow will engraft. And yeah, it was a long period of time. I mean, I wouldn't say long. It felt like long. It went from July to October, July, August, September, October. That whole time we were kind of waiting for things to happen.
How
and
are they keeping him alive? Like, how do they keep him alive during this time?
A lot of medications, a lot of antiviral medications. He was okay. I mean, he was responsive during that time, and his bone marrow was really poor. I mean, he couldn't have left the hospital, but you know, he was hanging in there. He was responsive, but eventually, after a while, also with related to his brain, and I still don't understand this, he started becoming non-responsive, and he really just started to become withdrawn. And you know, Chad, how many fingers am I holding up? All those sorts of things. He started just not being able to respond to. Even, you know, squeeze my hand, like even the basics of things like that. It was almost, they didn't say he had a stroke, but it was something mentally had happened where his brain had stopped sort of processing.
And this had to be a mean, you describe it as torture, but
Yeah.
you've gone all over the world. You've fought so hard together,
Yeah.
and you can't control if this bone marrow doesn't graft.
Yes, and the hospital tried many valiant efforts, I have to say. They tried so many things to try to recover it, and this technique and that practice, and it. I can't say they didn't try everything. They tried
Sure.
so hard to make it work.
So, how did you hold hope and kind of face reality?
Yeah, one of the things that happened to us when we were traveling cross country on one of our flights was this movie came on. It's called The Darkest Hour, about Winston Churchill. And I started thinking about Winston Churchill because that movie was very much about him trying to save the world. And I thought, okay, if Winston Churchill could save the world, maybe I can save Chad. Chad's my whole world.
Oh,
Yeah, and there's that quote from Winston Churchill, if you're going through hell, just keep going.
keep walking, right?
Yeah. And I that became my mantra during those dark days. There's nowhere to go but forward. We just have to keep going. Someday something will happen. Something will come out of this. And at the end, when I kind of realized in the last few weeks and months leading up to August of 2019 when he passed, and when he started losing responsiveness, I hadn't quite given up hope altogether, but it transformed a little bit into this idea of, what if everything you're going through right now is leading you to a future that's brighter than you can imagine? And I think that that's a variant of the Winston Churchill quote. It's just kind of focusing on, I don't know what's going on. I'm going through a lot. I'm changing. I'm suffering. But all of this is leading to something. I have to believe that this is leading to something. And I think that's what kept me going through those days.
And so, unfortunately, Chad did pass.
Yeah.
In August. And
In October.
In October.
Yeah.
So the bone marrow transplant was in July.
Yes.
And he never left the hospital.
Never left the hospital.
And in October,
Just
his
very
body,
quietly. Yep, they kind of told me it was going to happen. There was no recovery. By then, they had given him the AML diagnosis. It had really progressed to that point. The cancer had kind of taken over. Your bone marrow is a little bit like a garden of flowers, like these beautiful flowers doing all these beautiful things. The cancer comes in. The cancer's like weeds, kind of choking out those flowers. Now, every now and then, chemo comes along like a lawnmower and wipes out everything. But it allows the flowers to grow back again until the point where the flowers can't grow back and the weeds grow back. And it's all weeds. And that's essentially what would happen to Chad at the end of his life, is that the good bone marrow was out, kind of
just
out,
squeezed out.
by the cancer cells.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah,
that
thank you.
wasn't the outcome any
No.
of us wanted.
No, but realistically, with that poor prognosis in the beginning, I mean, we put it out of our minds, but it was always there. We knew it was there. We knew we weren't delusional about that, but we just thought we could run this like a startup and make the best possible outcome that we could.
Well, and you defied it for 8 years.
Yeah.
You know, he got
Well,
8 more years, right? 2011 to 2019.
Yeah. I mean, even from 2005, when we first had an inkling that something was wrong, all the way up to 2019. I mean, that's 14 years that this whole thing went from our first awareness of it to the final days.
And you said to me, I did learn about limits of fighting. And, when people talk about cancer, everyone talks about the fight.
Yeah.
And, one of the things I talk about being a multi-generational cancer survivor. And,
Yeah.
We have lots of survivors in my family, but we have lost people
Yeah.
as well. And, this thing about keep fighting, and you love them so much, right? But you're looking at what the fight is taking.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you wanted to talk about this, the limits of fightings and a different way of defining winning.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't like people to think that the outcome defines the success in a way, because I learned so much through this process. I am completely transformed, and that is also a form of success. I mean, Chad's life continues. I get to have conversations like this with you. I get to go out and talk to everyone that I can about what I went through and share the knowledge. And I'm really hopeful that this information that I now have, that Chad essentially paid for with his life, I'm really hopeful that that can do good things in the world to other people. Maybe somebody else doesn't have to go through what I've gone through. I'm already starting to see tangible signs of that, in that after Chad passed, I started getting involved with this organization, Team Telomere, that supports people with telomere biology disorders. I didn't really have any time to even pay attention to them when we were in the throes of his illness. But afterwards, I really felt compelled to do something with what information I had. And one of the first projects I worked on was updating our clinical guidelines that kind of cover all the different manifestations of telomere biology disorders. I contributed to one of the chapters about traveling for treatment, because it's common that in this community, people have to go places outside their home community, home hospital, because there are not a lot of people out there in the world. There are more people now, but not every hospital is going to have seen this or know what to do with it. And so the clinical guidelines, which we updated and published in 2022, I just heard that we've seen an uptick in the number of people being diagnosed with this disease since then. And I firmly believe it's because there's just more information out there. The guidelines are available at teamtelomere.org for anyone who wants to just download and have. You can download electronically. You can request a printed copy. We've seen how many hundreds and thousands of people are doing that. And it's small in the grand scheme of diseases. It's still a rare disease, but the fact that, we can go on to community chats and see more and more families. And I was just in Maine this summer at a retreat and met a number of families that I'd never met before. It's just being more and more diagnosed. So I can already see there's tangible impact to the work that this organization is doing, and I feel very much part of that.
And I'm sure they're funding research for treatment and, quality of life, life extension, dare we say cure, what's happening in that arena?
Absolutely. Well, there are 2 clinical trials right now that didn't exist when Chad was going through this. If either of these clinical trials, if we'd known anything about them, we would have put him on them right away. And there's more in the pipeline. We call them shots on goal. And I actually am helping to work towards funding another shot on goal. So I don't know what the solution is going to be. I don't know what the treatment is going to be, but every day that you can live longer with this disease is going to bring us closer to ultimately that, what I call my favorite 4-letter word, which is cure.
Right. And, I think that's incredible what you've put your heartache to. And I think you also have a foundation in Chad's name that keeps his memory. All right, you have something, or a race, or I know I've seen something with Chad's name.
Yeah, I do a lot with him. One of the things that we funded was, even though Chad's not around, I'm still telling everybody about Chad and still doing a lot with him. It's part of me feeling connected to him still, definitely. One of the grants that I helped to fund for one of these shots on goals was our Carson family grant. So under his name and my name together. I'm sure he would be happy to do whatever he could to support it. It's just, I have to kind of carry the mantle without him here. And that it's a lot of times I wonder, what would Chad think about what I'm doing? I'm sure he would be behind it, but one of the good things about me and Chad, and one of the things I'm so lucky to have had a husband like him, was that our brains were often aligned. I don't have to really wonder what would Chad think, because I just say, well, what do I think? What I think is probably what he would have thought. So if I'm on board, he would have been on board.
That's amazing alignment. And I heard a beautiful metaphor, and I don't know if it's a metaphor, but energy in physics cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes form.
Yeah.
So as human beings, we are energy. So his form, whatever this new form is with you, apparently.
I think it never left me. I think it's still there, and it's in my kids, and it's in everyone he touched. And in fact, it's been 6 years since his date of passing. I just organized a little hike and invited his community to come join me on a hike. I didn't know who was going to come, and 6 or 8 people showed up, and it was just his friends from work, our mom friends from the elementary school, people who knew him. It was so lovely, and we just kind of felt his presence as we hiked in nature. And it was really great for me to connect with folks that, I kind of knew through him, and now that I can know them directly, which is also so lovely.
That's wonderful. So let's back up, if it's not too hard.
Yeah, please.
To talk about you during the bone marrow transplant episode, and because you had just donated part of your liver.
That's right.
You're outside the ICU or in the ICU as your husband is recovering from the liver transplant. You're halfway around the world with no friends and family, and you just donated part of your liver. That's not a minor thing.
Yeah.
How did you take care of yourself while taking care of Chad?
Yeah, so that was definitely a challenge. I will say my sister-in-law was lovely in that she came to Korea. It was over Christmas too, so she left her family behind for the holidays and came and spent that time with me and kind of cycled between us. Like, I was in the regular recovery room, Chad was in the ICU. On Christmas Day, she got me a pizza from outside the hospital. It was a Domino's pizza in Korea.
Worked, right?
Yeah, it worked. And we sat in the basement of the hospital. I say basement, it's actually kind of almost like a shopping mall. It's really beautiful, actually. It's a beautiful basement. And we sat and ate pizza together, and kind of just, she kept me going during those early days, I have to say. But she couldn't stay forever. She had to go back. And when I was in sort of maybe about a week or so after I got discharged, I was able to start sort of being Chad's caregiver too. I was very lucky in that I recovered rather quickly, but I also was lucky to get good advice from a lot of people, which is, as a caregiver, put on your own oxygen mask first. Mm-hmm. And Chad supported me on that, and he also, as a human being and the great human being he was, he often told me, Heidi, just remember, Chad just wants you to be happy. And he used to give me that advice like way before he got sick, like when we first met each other. Just remember, Chad just wants you to be happy. He would even say it in the third person like that. Mm-hmm. And so I think he wanted me to sort of bake that message into my brain. And so I knew, like, I have to take care of myself too, because if this disease ends up affecting me, that's terrible. I mean, it's terrible enough that it's affecting Chad. Now, if it ends up affecting me, that's like even worse. And I cannot let that happen. And so, yeah, I was with him in the ICU. I did all the good things you're supposed to do. I exercised his legs. I told him stories. I recorded messages because I got tired of talking to him and just like play them on my phone over and over again, like telling him the story of his life, and, just so he'd have some voices to listen to. I played music for him. I remember reading Hemingway to him. I'm not even sure why. I just found this book and I just started reading it. And yeah, that's how we passed the time. But I do remember one time I left him in the ICU because I'm just like, I'm going to go crazy. I'm literally going stir crazy here. And I'm in Seoul, South Korea. I've never really been here very much. So I'm going to go on the subway and go somewhere. And I went to Gangnam, like Gangnam style. And I walked around. They have this thing called K-pop Road where they have all the like K-pop bears. Each bear statue represents a different K-pop band. And so I was like, I'm just in the middle of this super light and frothy thing that has absolutely nothing to do with health or ICU or cancer or telomeres or anything. It was just such a nice diversion to kind of remind myself there's a world out there. And one day I will rejoin this world. I'm not able to yet, but right now I got a little glimpse of it. And I also, as much as I do like Korean food, at that point, I'd had a lot of Korean food kind of into every day. I found a Middle Eastern restaurant that had hummus and pita and falafel. I was very grateful for that. There's not too many of those in Seoul, but I just sat down and I just filled up on sort of comfort food that I hadn't had in a while. And so it was reminding me of home.
That's great.
So yeah, I think you need to do those things. So I do have those sort of in between the sort of tedium of the ICU, I do have these little bright spots of times when I reminded myself that there's a world out there that I'm going to rejoin one day.
And are there any things you wish someone had told you about how to protect yourself, how to take care of yourself during this process?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The advice about putting on your own safety vest or oxygen mask first, that is absolutely paramount, because if you're not there, you can't support your other people. But what does it mean to put on your oxygen mask? Like, what does it mean for you? for me, it was getting on the subway and going to this place and just like, oh, living in K-pop land for an hour or two, which was a total diversion from my normal life in the ICU. And then the food too. I think also just having some food that filled me up and made me feel comforted, that was valuable too. And so finding those moments where you can nourish yourself in different ways, whatever that takes, I think that's part of what you need to get through as a caregiver, and don't feel at all guilty about doing that. Like, because your person would want you to do that. Your person wants you to survive and succeed and thrive.
I think that's really important because people feel guilty, feeling moments of happiness when someone they love is suffering.
Yeah.
Right? And, there's nothing good about how Chad suffered.
Yeah.
But you being miserable doesn't change that.
It doesn't change it. It doesn't make it better. It only makes it worse. It makes the disease now affect 2 people instead of 1.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, after Chad died, you could have said, I am not spending any more time here. You joined Team Telomere, though. You committed yourself, you committed your life to improving knowledge and awareness, to telling Chad's story, which, by the way, when you said that, I was reminded of Hamilton, right? Yeah. She's there to tell the story and to be in the narrative. And Chad is very much in the narrative.
Yeah.
He's there. So for someone in our audience who's a caregiver for someone going through AML or has lost someone to bone marrow failure, can you talk about taking action and how that was part of your healing?
Yeah, that's a really good point in terms of how it helped me heal. I just feel like I went through something extraordinary. Like it was such an odyssey that I couldn't just bury it and put it aside and pretend, oh, I got through that and hopefully never again, right? But right. I just feel like you can't go through something like that without it fundamentally transforming you and changing your outlook and changing your perspective and changing your goals. And I call it now my Telo mission, right? Just sort of my mission to try to make sense out of what happened to me and make the world better for other people who are maybe going through something similar or different. I mean, this disease presents itself in so many different ways. We have people in our community who are 2 and 3 and 4 years old needing a bone marrow transplant. We have people who are middle-aged like Chad before they realize anything is wrong. And we have people who are getting diagnosed with this at age 70. It usually manifests in pulmonary fibrosis in your 60s or 70s. People who've lived their whole life without knowing that they had a rare disease. So because of these myriad manifestations, there's so many different people coming to this community with different experiences. And mine is just like one tiny little story that is part of the bigger picture. But yes, in terms of trying to transform this knowledge that I gained, this experience that I had, I couldn't just keep it bottled inside of me. I feel like I need to share it. I need to get it out there. If it can be of benefit to anybody, that's my goal. And ultimately, hopefully a benefit to our entire community in that we're moving closer and closer towards that magic 4-letter word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think you've done some amazing things, Heidi. It's really,
thank you.
It's inspirational. All right. So I like to do a lightning round, which is just quick. I ask a question or a statement and you give the first thing that comes to your mind.
Sure.
Okay. Complete the sentence. Before Chad's bone marrow transplant, I wish someone had told me.
I think that goes back to how hard a bone marrow transplant truly is, how really transformational in your body that really is. It's not just switching out the old blood. It's not an oil change. It's not an oil change. It's really changing your entire system.
And what's the most important question someone should ask before agreeing to be a living donor?
Yeah, that's hard. And in fact, I feel like I didn't ask a lot of questions. I was just like, I have to do this because this is the only way forward. But I hope that you have someone on your side who is unbiased and who's just there to support you and try to give you all the information that you need. I think you need to be comfortable that in my case, the outcome wasn't positive. We went through this giant liver transplant. I lost half of my liver to this process, and still in that, the goal that we had hoped of saving Chad's life didn't come to fruition. So I think you need to be okay with that before you go in and know that you're part of the process, but it's not, you don't get to control the process.
Right.
And of course, that's on top of all of the, emotional, financial, all the other constraints that are involved in, you becoming a living liver donor. I think you have to be prepared that you don't have control of the outcome.
Right. And I mean, your liver, the cool thing about livers is they regenerate.
That's right.
So you donate and you have recovery, but long term,
yes,
you should be okay.
I expect so. And in fact, one thing that gave me real hope was one of Chad's doctors, a young guy, he himself had been a living liver donor transplant at that hospital. And he had been a living liver donor at that hospital. And that is even what motivated his interest in medicine. And now he's working on the floor in the ICU, helping people like Chad get through their transplants.
Wow.
So that was very inspirational. All right, Heidi, too.
I'll bet. And, he could speak to you from a very unique place. He'd been you.
Yeah.
So if you could change one thing about how doctors talk to patients and caregivers about bone marrow transplant risks, what would it be?
That's a really good question. I think we were very well informed about the risks, and I think we went in knowing we don't know what's going to happen, but whatever happens, we're shooting our shot. Going back to a Hamilton quote, we have to shoot our shot. And we were informed about the risks, but at the same time I heard those risks, I sort of thought, well, we can work miracles. We got through a liver transplant. Nobody thought we'd get through a liver transplant. We'll get through this bone marrow transplant. We will do that too, because nobody thought we can do that. We can do this too. But I think, you just have to listen to their words and be really realistic. And the risks are really great. I mean, not everything is a slam dunk. And as much as we thought we had achieved so much and we could continue to achieve more, I think, I don't even know how to put it.
But you would have done it anyway.
Absolutely. There was no choice. 46 years old, two amazing kids, a great career, so much to live for. And that's sometimes when I think about it, what I'm sad about is that the world is missing out on all the great things Chad had yet to give to this world. So that's one of the things I'm sad for the world, that the world doesn't have Chad in it anymore.
Well, Chad would want Heidi to be happy. Pretty sure that's what you said he said.
Yes.
So
no, definitely. That's my North Star. That's what guides every decision I make.
And I think Chad is contributing to the world just in a way that you hadn't thought.
Yeah.
Right? And we never know.
Yeah.
So 2 more quick ones.
Yeah.
What's one thing that gave you hope in those dark hours?
Well, the darkest hour was the movie. I think just keeping on, and trying to find a way forward is what gave us hope. And anytime anyone said anything like, oh, his numbers are better today, or he was able to respond to me today where he couldn't yesterday, all those little things kept me going from day to day. And then in the big picture, this hope that whatever I'm going through now, it's not going to last forever. It's going to end at some point in some way. And maybe one day that future is going to be way brighter than anything I can imagine. And even now I think about it as the door of Chad closed, but many windows have opened. I've had so many amazing things happen to me in my personal life since his passing that I couldn't have anticipated. They've just brought so much joy to my life that I never would have anticipated in those dark days. So that's what kept me going.
And your kids were sentient. They were aware of what was going on.
Yeah.
How did you navigate this as a parent?
It was really hard. The one thing I will say, a bright light in all of this, while I was out traveling so much, my kids learned to do laundry for themselves. Yes, and they've never looked back. I haven't done a single load of laundry of theirs since then. So you got to look for little bright things.
Absolutely.
Yes. It was hard to be realistic, right? Because I'm a realistic person. I'm not sort of starry-eyed kind of person. I really see things hopefully the way they are, and I had to try to communicate that to my kids. But at the end, I remember having to tell them, like, this did not work out. And I the day after Chad passed away, we were on the East Coast for that bone marrow transplant. I flew home, and I was just with them ever since. And guess what? A few months later, COVID hit, and we were all locked in the house together for a year and a half while they did homework did their whole education from the kitchen table. So we spent a lot of time during those days just being together, recovering together, holding each other through the pandemic, holding each other through the challenge of remote schooling and everything else that entailed. So we spent a good amount of time just using that time to recover together.
Yeah. Which probably, in a weird way, lots of things were bad about that, but that was a gift of that.
That was a little bit of a gift for us, right? I came back to, well, one thing I will say, after Chad passed and the next day I flew home, I felt like I had stopped hitting my head with a hammer. Like the whole time that he was going through this horrible, what are we going to go next?
Ordeal.
Where are we going to go? This horrible ordeal, this horrible odyssey. Now we got to go fly to Korea. Now we got to go fly here. Just life upended all the time. I felt like all I have to do is take care of myself and my kids. Like, how exciting is that? Like, that is, I can do that. That's going to be a joy for me compared to what I just been through. So it was a bit of a relief to have to only worry about us. And even when the pandemic hit, I felt like, oh, I can deal with this now. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine after what we've been through.
Yeah, well, you definitely can do hard things.
That taught me that, for sure.
For sure. So what's your advice for someone looking to kick cancer's ass, especially as the caregiver, watching someone they love go through this kind of an ordeal? Yeah.
Take it day by day. Look for the bright things, the little moments of hope that get you from one moment to the next, because if you connect those little dots, this little moment of hope leads to that little moment of hope, leads to this bigger moment of hope. That's what kept me going. And to know that there's a world out there, there's a world of K-pop out there that you may forget about. K-pop bears, there's a world of all kinds of foods you've never tried before that are waiting for you. And don't lose sight of that. Don't get stuck in this, tunnel of your disease, because life is just too big and beautiful to get stuck in that tunnel.
So, Heidi, where can listeners learn more about Team Telomere's work, especially if they're dealing with these symptoms without a clear cause?
Yeah. Best place to start is the teamtelomere.org website. And of course, we have all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X. So yes, feel free to come check us out there.
We'll put the link in the show notes. And what's on deck for you in the Carson Family Research Award?
Well, continuing on with the work that we've done to date, definitely. And I just got back from a symposium at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, which was a wonderful way for telomere researchers to bring together all their work and share their latest research. And one of the beautiful things that we did was, in between all of the medical talks, we had patient talks as well, people who are themselves going through this, and I even got to speak about Chad. So I feel like that was a lovely way for people who are clinicians and researchers and dealing with the cells and the molecules on the day-to-day basis, and not to lose sight of the fact that there are real people and there are really lovely stories out there of people who are living with disease and getting cured through successful transplants. And there are quite a few, and there's more now than ever than I happen to be somebody who didn't have a successful story, but there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of success stories, and that's a wonderful thing for everyone to hear.
Well, and hopefully, as you said, every year we get better at it. Every year we learn more. I mean, that's in the world of cancer. Sometimes the effort is stay alive long enough for the next treatment.
That's right.
Right? And,
absolutely.
Well, Heidi, thank you for sharing Chad.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
And for sharing your story and your heartbreakingly hard-won wisdom.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Joelle. It was lovely speaking with you. And thank you for all that you're doing.
Well, like you, trying to share stories and help people find the wisdom and find, I think of them as life rings.
Yeah.
That we're just throwing life rings out there so that if this is the one people need, like, bone marrow transplants can be really hard.
Yeah.
And this is how I can get through. It's okay for me to take a few moments of joy for myself as the caregiver.
That's right.
So with that, I'll end with, we never choose the pitch, but we do always choose the swing.
Yeah.
I'm Joelle Kaufman. Please share this episode with someone who might be facing a bone marrow transplant decision, someone loving a person through AML or bone marrow transplants or a rare disease, someone who needs to know that when every treatment fails, love and meaning endure. Find the show notes and bonus content at KCA Podcast. And until next week, keep kicking cancer's ass.